The summer of 1996 was scorching hot in the small town of New Waterford, Texas. The kind of heat that clung to your skin, making the air thick and heavy, almost suffocating. In a town where nothing much ever happened, the kids spent their nights cruising the empty streets, hanging out at the old abandoned drive-in, or sitting by the riverbank, trying to ward off the boredom of small-town life. For 16-year-old Leah Parker, this summer felt different. She wasn't just bored, she was restless. It was as if something dark was stirring inside her, something she didn't understand. She'd always been an outcast at school, too quiet, too strange, too drawn to things that made others uncomfortable. While other girls were obsessed with fashion and boys, Leah spent her time reading crime novels and watching old horror movies. That summer, she'd stumbled across something that changed everything. A documentary about the Texarkana Moonlight Murders of 1946 had aired late one night on a local channel. Leah sat transfixed, her eyes glued to the screen as the story unfolded. The Phantom Killer, a masked figure who had terrorized couples parked in secluded areas, had never been caught. The murders had left a mark on Texarkana, and Leah couldn't shake the image of the killer, a faceless shadow, stalking the night, preying on innocent lovers. For weeks after, she couldn't stop thinking about it. The idea of someone being able to slip through the cracks, to evade capture, to become a legend, an urban myth that still haunted the town decades later, fascinated her. She started researching everything she could about the Phantom Killer, poring over old newspaper clippings, books, and crime reports. She was captivated by the cold brutality, the eerie silence of the unsolved case. And slowly, an idea began to take root in her mind. One sweltering August afternoon, Leah found herself at the New Waterford Public Library. It was her usual haunt, a place where she could escape the oppressive heat and the judgmental stares of her peers. She sat in a dusty corner, flipping through a book on unsolved murders when she noticed someone watching her from across the room. Jake Dunham, one of the most popular boys in school, leaned against the bookshelf, smirking at her. His baseball cap was pulled low over his eyes, and his Letterman jacket clung to his broad shoulders. He wasn't alone either. His girlfriend, Mallory, stood beside him, twirling a lock of her blonde hair and whispering something in his ear. Leah's heart sank. She knew what was coming. "Hey, Parker," Jake called out, his voice dripping with mockery. "Still reading about all those freaky killers? You planning on becoming one yourself?" Mallory giggled, covering her mouth as if she couldn't help but laugh. Leah stared down at her book, her face burning with humiliation. She'd been the target of their ridicule for years, but lately, it felt worse. The teasing had turned meaner, more personal. "Maybe you should stop reading that creepy stuff," Mallory added with a sneer. "It's not good for you. You're already weird enough as it is." Leah said nothing, just kept her eyes glued to the page. But something inside her snapped. She could feel it, a rising anger, a deep resentment that had been festering for too long. Jake and Mallory eventually left, but the damage was done. Leah slammed the book shut and left the library, her mind racing. She walked aimlessly through town, her thoughts swirling with dark fantasies. She couldn't get the Phantom Killer out of her head. He had been an ordinary person once, someone who had blended in with the crowd, unnoticed, just like her. But he had become something more, a legend, a figure of fear and power. That night, Leah lay in bed, staring up at the ceiling, unable to sleep. The Texas heat pressed in around her, suffocating. She thought about Jake and Mallory, about all the times they had made her feel small and insignificant. And then she thought about the Phantom Killer, about how he had taken control, how he had become something more than just a person. He had become a force. A week later, Leah found herself standing in front of the old abandoned drive-in on the edge of town. The sun had just set, casting long shadows across the cracked pavement. The place had been shut down for years, a relic of a bygone era. But it was still a popular spot for local teens to hang out, especially after dark. She had a plan now, one that had been simmering in the back of her mind ever since that day at the library. She didn't want to just be a victim anymore. She wanted to be something more. Leah had never been good at making friends, but she had a knack for getting people to trust her when she needed to. That evening, she'd overheard Mallory and Jake talking about going to the drive-in. They were planning to meet some friends there, but Leah knew it wouldn't be long before they'd ditch the group to sneak off somewhere more private. She waited until the drive-in was nearly deserted before slipping into the shadows. She'd brought a black hoodie, one that concealed her face, and a flashlight. Her heart pounded in her chest as she crept through the overgrown weeds and tall grass, her eyes scanning the area. It didn't take long to find them. Jake's truck was parked at the far end of the lot, hidden behind a row of rusted-out cars. Leah crouched behind an old sedan, her breath shallow as she watched them through the cracked windows. Jake and Mallory sat in the front seat, their heads close together, whispering and laughing. The sight of them made Leah's stomach churn with anger. She could feel it building inside her, that same rage she'd felt at the library. But this time, she wasn't going to let it eat away at her. This time, she was going to do something about it. She waited until the right moment, until Jake and Mallory were lost in their own little world, then she crept closer. The flashlight in her hand felt heavy, almost like a weapon. Her fingers tightened around it as she reached the truck, her heart racing in her chest. Suddenly, she slammed the flashlight against the window with all her strength. The glass shattered, and Mallory screamed, her voice piercing the night air. Jake jumped, his eyes wide with shock as he fumbled for the door handle. Before he could react, Leah was there, yanking the door open and pulling him out of the truck. He stumbled, his feet catching on the gravel as he tried to get his bearings. "What the hell?" he started, but Leah didn't let him finish. She swung the flashlight again, this time aiming for his head. The blow connected with a sickening thud, and Jake crumpled to the ground, unconscious. Mallory was still screaming, her hands covering her face as she tried to scramble out of the truck. Leah grabbed her by the arm, dragging her out into the dirt. "Please, no!" Mallory sobbed, her voice shaking. "Don't hurt me, please." Leah's mind was a blur of adrenaline and fury. She couldn't think clearly, couldn't process what was happening. All she knew was that she finally had the power, and it felt intoxicating. But as she raised the flashlight again, something stopped her. Mallory's terrified eyes met hers, and for a brief moment, Leah saw herself reflected in them, not the monster she wanted to become, but the scared, lonely girl she had always been. She dropped the flashlight, her hands trembling. The sound of Mallory's sobs filled the air, and Leah stumbled backward, suddenly horrified by what she had done. Without another word, she turned and ran, disappearing into the night. The next morning, the town was buzzing with rumors. Jake Dunham had been found unconscious at the drive-in, his truck vandalized, and Mallory had been too shaken to speak about what had happened. No one knew who had attacked him or why. Leah sat in her room, staring at the news report on TV. The Phantom Killer had left his mark on Texarkana, and now, she had left hers on New Waterford. But instead of feeling empowered, all she felt was empty. An emptiness she knew she would soon have to fill.